Greetings everyone and welcome back. In the last video we create our employee inputs, and in this video we're going to validate those inputs. So here we have the method that we created in the last video, this method here. And if we check it here in our controller, it's empty for now. What we're going to do, we're going to use the Laravel form request to write our validation rules. So instead of accepting the default request object here, we're going to create another form request that we will have our rules to validate the data that it's coming from the user. So what we're going to do, we're going to use the PHP adson command to create a new form request. And I'm just going to say PHP adson make it's a request. I'm going to store it in employees folder, and I'm just going to call it post employee form request, like that. I'm going to create it. It's already created. So I'm going to go inside this file that we just created right now, and I'm going to change the authorize here. Instead of returning false, it's going to return true. And here in our rules method, we're going to write our rules here. And the first property of the employee that I'm gonna be validating is the email. So I'm going to put all the rules here for now, because this is just a simple validation and we don't need to put this one against our function. So I'm just going to scoop all the rules inside here, and it will be good to go, since it's just a very simple validation. All right, so I'm going to start with the email, and I will say that the email first will be required, and it should also be a valid email. And I also want it to be unique. So I'm going to pass the unique row, and I'm going to provide to which table it should be looked. So the table name is employees, and the column will be employee email. That will be my column. What I do most of times, I just use the table name first, then I write the column that I want to write, because in most cases I have many tables having the same column. And instead of trying to mutate those columns when I am doing my queries, I just prefix all my columns with the table name, of course in singular. For example, if my table is employees, then I'll say employee email. If my table is users, then, as you guessed, I would say user email, because I don't want to select a column and with an alias when I am querying my data and returning my resources to the client. Another property of the employee that I am going to be validating is the phone number. So I'm gonna have the phone number here, and I'm just gonna say it's required. So I'm just going to copy this row above here. I'm going to have it here. It's gonna be required. I could say min, so I could say min should be let me go with 10. And it's not unique. Not unique. And Also, the table is employees and the column name will be employee phone. So let me just have it like that. Actually, I don't need all this here. Phone is required. Since it's only required, we don't need to, for it to be maybe unique, we don't need to pass the column name and the table name as well. So for the for only being required, that one will be okay because we don't want to look in the database for anything. And another one is the employee photo. So the employee image, this one is not required, but in case the user provides it, then it means that we have to validate it. So uh, it, it has to be an image, and we're only going to have some selected extensions for this image. So in the times here, I'm going to say I need a JPEG and I need a PNG. I also need a JPG, of course, and I'll only need those three extensions for now. And also, I'm going to say it must be a 1 MB file, so it's going to be 1024 kilobytes, which is equivalent to 1 MB. All right. Okay, so that is it. Another thing we could do, we could also validate the name. So I could say name here is required. Main mom is 3. We don't want a name that is less than 3 characters. Okay. All right. So the rules that we're going to be using, and here now instead of using the default request object, I'm gonna use the post employee form request like that. And another thing I'm gonna do, I'm going to create this method in our employees model. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna return, and that will be this employee instance. Remember, this is the instance that we initialized before here in our constructor. Another thing you could do, you don't need to uh, instantiate this one in a constructor. For example, if you're only going to use it once, if for example you're using only this instance of model once in your file, it's better just to inject it inside your method directly here. The reason why I did it like that, I wanted to have more one instance that I can multi-use or that I can use for quite some functions in my class in this employee controller class. So that's why I instantiated it in the constructor. Otherwise, you could just pass it inside your function and continue like that. But as for me, I already created one instance and I am going to use that instance in all my methods in this class. All right. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to create a new method inside this model, and it's going to be post employee. And now I'm just going to pass this request object that's coming from the user. All right, so just going to copy this. I'll go inside the model tab here, and just immediately here after defining our fillables, I'm going to create a new method, public method. It's gonna be post employee, and it's gonna come in with the request that we provided. And what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna return response. I'm gonna say JSON here I'm going to have some data, and I'm just going to say status. It's going to be true. Let me just pass true for now. And message, I'm gonna have a message here which I'm gonna default to a string saying employee data was valid, and it was saved into the database, and I'm gonna return a 200 here, right? Okay, so if I get to this method, then I'll be sure that my data was valid, and I could return this response. Otherwise, the response will be returned premature from the controller because the validation will fail. All right. Okay. So after that, now we have already the methods in place. What I'm going to do, I'm now going to go back to the view, which is this one here. And what I want to do, I want, in case of an error for now, I'm just going to console log the the response. I'll want to console log the whole response and see what's going to come back. All right. Okay, so let me just clear the console for now. Going to reload the page. And okay, all right. I'm going to bring in the model again. I'm going to send the request, and here we have a response, and we can see already we have some errors saying the email must be a valid email address, and we have another one here saying the font must be at least 10 characters. And yeah, so those are some of the error messages that we are getting, and we are getting them from this response JSON here. So this response JSON, it's what we're gonna use to send the error to the user. And again, you can see that we have status of 422. So for example, if we go back here and just query response.status, let's see what status it's gonna come back. So I'm gonna go back here. I'll reload the page. And I'm going to bring in the model again. I'll try to save this because it's gonna fail. And now you can see the status is 422. So we can use that one to our advantage, because not every time we get an error response from the server is a case of validation. Could be 500, it could be something else. Okay, so and what I'm going to do here, I'm going to have a condition. If then response status will be equal to 422, we'll be sure that this is a validation problem, and we can catch the validation and give it back to the user. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, I'm going to loop through the array inside the response JSON. So I will say for each of the response JSON that we get, so for each response dot its response JSON, for each of these, and inside the response JSON we have the errors that we want to see. We're going to have the errors, then I'm going to have a function here, and I'm going to get the error index. I'm just going to name it error index, and here I'm going to have the error object itself, like that. And then inside here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to have the error. So remember that we defined our IDs, our input IDs, to have the same name as the name property of the input. So we have the ID being equal same name as the name property of the input in question here. So which means that we could know the ID of the input which has an error. So I'm going to say the error input then will be the same as the ID. So, and this one should be the ID of this error index here. This error index will be the name of the input returned from the form request, and we could use it to advantage because we know that every uh, input ID is equals to the input's name. So we could argue that and will be on the correct side. And what we can do then, we can say, okay, that this one, we're going to take it, this input, we're going to have it, and I'm going to have some CSS on it, and I'm just going to draw a red border on the input in question. So I'm going to have 2 pixels, and it's going to be a solid line around the input, and the color I'm going to put to be red. All right. Okay, like that. So this is the input. We know we get the input, and we can try that out and see if it's gonna work. So I'm going back here. I have to reload the page. I'm going to clean my console again. I'll bring in the model, and here I'm just going to send in the function, and sure enough, now you see our employee name here has been decorated with red here. So as you can see, it's red. If we reload it again, it will not be red in from the beginning. It will be primary color, which is the the color I'm using on the borders of my inputs. And I want you to watch on this input here. When I send a request, it's gonna come back and it's gonna be red. Okay. All right. So we we're able to capture that. So after that, what I'm gonna do, remember that every input could have multiple validation. And it means that then this object we are getting here, it's an array of errors. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to have another a loop inside here, and it's gonna loop this object of this array of errors that I'm calling the error object, which is this one here. So I'm gonna say for each of these, for each of this error object, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna have another function here, and it's gonna be the second one. So what I'm gonna say, it's error index, just error index. Just going to call it like that, and I'm going to call the other array is error object. I'll just call it error object inner. And now inside here, I'm going to have a statement. And this statement, I'm going to say let the, so here I'm going to have the errors or the error array if you want to do that. So I'm just going to say let the error array be equals to error inner, the one that we defined, error object inner. And what I'm going to do here, each input could have multiple validation errors. And what happens at the end of every error message, there's a period. I mean, there's a dot. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna split these errors. I'm gonna split these errors by the period that is at each end of the error for each input. So yeah, I'm gonna split it by the period or the dot. You could call it the dot notation or dot or period, anything. And after splitting this one, if you know this split function here, it's going to give us an array again. So if it's going to give us an array, then what we can do, we can loop again through that array. So for each, and this time around, we are going to loop through this array here. I'm going to loop through this array. It's a function. And now here we're going to have the error index. Now we are in errors, and this is going to be the error index. And now we have the error itself, or the error message itself. So I'm gonna say error message like that. And inside this function block here, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna say I'm going to create an error input. So I'm going to say let error input or span or anything be equal to, I'm going to create a new element here, and I'm going to create a paragraph. So here inside, I'm going to create a paragraph like that. And I'm going to have a class, and this class is just gonna be text denture. So that I have a red text, I'm gonna have a padding, a margin of 0, padding of 0, and I'm gonna have a custom class here called error message like that. And now inside, uh, that's the class. It's supposed to be like this, like that. And now inside here, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna pass my error message, which is this one, like that. Sorry. I have to go down to yeah. So I'm gonna pass my error message like that. And after that, so that is my error input. And then after that, what I have to do is to attach it to the error input, which is the one that we created around here. So what I'm gonna do, I'm going to attach it to the error input just after the the input that has an error. So I'm just going to say error input dot after I'm going to have the error message like that. Actually, not the error message, but the error input, because the error message is already inside the error input like that. I'm gonna save that, and I'm going to go back to my page here. I will reload. I'll give you some minute to reload, come back. I'll clear my console as usual. Then I'll bring in my model and I will try to save. And there we have these, but we sure do not have the error message itself. So something could be wrong. Let me just try to see, inspect this element, see if I have, and we don't see any error message somewhere. So we have this. So I think we have a problem in naming our inputs. Let's just check what's the idea of this input name, name, and the other one should be employee email, and the other one is employee phone. Yeah, I think that we have a problem with that, because if we're going to return the error, it's going to come as so let's just do one thing. Let's just quickly console.log, and I'm going to log the errors. So I'm going to log the error array and see what's going to give us. Click here, I'm going to reload the application. Just going to give it some seconds to load. Then I'll bring in my model again. I'm going to send this request again, and it's gonna say the email, phone, name, and employee photo. So it's email, phone, name, employee photo. So we are getting the wrong inputs here. So it's name, email, phone, and employee photo. So if I go to my model here, I'm gonna change that to name. Then it's gonna be email. So I'm gonna change that to email. And I'm gonna change this one to phone, as well as this one. It's gonna be phone, like that. Going to save that. I'll reload the page again. Just some moments to load, and I bring in the model again under save the employee, and now we have the red border on name, email, and phone, but we still don't have the text itself. So let's see why the text is not being appended here. So I have the error input after we append this, which is this one. And so I think I have a conflict here. I am using same variable twice. As you can see, I have error input here, And I also have the same error input name here. So this is going to bring up conflict, and the jQuery is not going to know which error input I am talking about. So what I'm going to do, I am going to say error input inner. This one, I'm just going to call it error input inner, and then that is what I am going to append to the other input, which is the original one. This is the main input, and this is the small text of paragraph that we're going to have after the error input itself, or after the input itself. So in case the response is success, what I'm going to do, I'm going to console log, so dot log the response here. Res Going to console log the response here in case it's a successful one. All right, so let's go ahead and try to reload this. So after reloading, I'm going to bring in the model again, which is this one here. I am going to try to save this employee information, and now as you can see, we have a red paragraph beneath each of the elements that we are doing the validation for. And also we have the employee photo must be a file type JPEG, PNG, and JPG, and the employee photo must be an image. So that's working correctly. But one thing I want to do, I want to remove the error before we start submitting the form again. So I want, when I click on the post employee here, before I collect the employee data, I want to clear the error message and also remove the red border. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to target the error class that we created. We call it error message class. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to have an empty space on each of those paragraphs that we created. And another thing I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this, and here, instead of this, I'm just going to target all my inputs like that. And now, instead of being the red color, I'm going to define a custom color to be 73617 to be F and 0. That will be the initial border of my input. So if I go ahead and try to reload this, it's gonna come back. I'll try to send the request again. And some input is not defined, of course, because this one here is supposed to be like that. So going back, and I reload the page again. Going to wait for it to come back. I'll bring in the model. I'll try to save the data. And as you can see, it's now coming with errors. If I try to save again, after I click the button, the inputs are going to be with blue border, but then after the response comes back, we're going to get the red border, signifying to us that we have an error. So what I'm gonna do, I'm going to change this image. I'm going to select a valid image, and I'm going to get one from here. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm going to get one from here, and I'm also going to provide name. So I'm just going to say name, going to say me@me.com. And here I'm gonna say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, something like that. And I'm going to send again the data. And now this time around, we're not getting an error. If we go to the network, we're getting another kind of error on all database data tables. So it means that it's working, only that we have the wrong database on our environment. So let me go ahead and try to change that. So I'll bring in my sidebar. I'll go to I don't need that though. I'll search for env file. This one here, data tables. Instead of data tables, I'm going to say, all right. I think for sure we don't have these data tables in our database. So I'm gonna bring it. I'll go to PHP myadmin. It's gonna come. Then here I'm just going to create new DB like that. All right. And I'm going to migrate my database. So PHP Hudson migrate should migrate everything, and I'm going to optimize Hudson optimize. It's going to optimize my files like that. So I'm going to go back to here. I'm going to try to reload. Oh, no need. I'm going to just save this again. And I'm still getting an on-column employee email. So let's see what we have in our data tables. Employees here. We have employee email, employee phone, and saying, oh, sorry, going to just bring it back here. Employee email in Excel, let's go from employees to employee email. Non-column employee email. I think I have a space somewhere inside the requests. Employee email. I think it should be like that. Okay, let's try that out and see if that one works. Gonna have that cleared. Bring it in again. And now we get a 200, and we get a response telling us the employee data was valid. Remember, this is what we returned, and if we check, we see that we have a response which is telling us that our employee data was valid. So that's how you can validate your images. For example, if I check another image, I'm sure this image is way too big and it might not pass the validation. And I think that one passed. I need a bigger image. Not sure if I have a big image. That is 1024. Okay, let me check from my projects, and here I think I'm going inside I'm checking for if I have a very big image. Yeah, like this one. If I try to upload this image, Let's see if it's gonna go. You see now this image is very big and it's gonna be validated and it's gonna come back and tell us that the employee photo must not be greater than 1024 kilobytes, which is equivalent to 1 MB. And this image here, it's 4 MB, so it's not going to be valid. If I send a wrong email, it's going to come back and tell us that we must provide a valid email. All right, so that's how we can validate our data using Ajax and Laravel. And we're going to stop here in this video. And we're going to stop here for the validation. Of course, after validating your data, now you can go ahead and write your store logic here. So here is where you're going to write your store logic to store the data into the database. So store data into the database. All right. Okay, so thank you for being with me on this one. I'll see you in our next one.